The conference room was so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead when my father shoved my presentation across the table, letting it skid to the floor like trash. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold with the kind of irritation reserved for strangers who inconvenience him. "Did you even think this through?" he snapped, stabbing a finger at me. "This is amateur work. Actually, no, it's worse. It's embarrassing. You really can't do a single thing without my hand holding yours." A few executives shifted uncomfortably. My coworkers stared down at their laptops, pretending they suddenly had urgent emails. I felt the heat rush up my neck, my pulse pounding in my ears. I curled my fingers under the table so no one would see them shaking. I tried to swallow the lump forming in my throat, but it stayed. I wasn't being criticized. I was being destroyed. And as he leaned back in his chair, satisfied, smug, dismissive, I felt it click inside me with terrible clarity. He doesn't want me to grow. He wants me to be dependent. I left that meeting on autopilot, nodding when people spoke to me, smiling when they offered sympathy that felt more like pity. But the second I reached the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and pressed my back against the cold metal door. My breath came out in shallow gasps. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I whispered to myself, "It's okay, you're okay." But I wasn't. Nothing was okay. I stared at the tiny scratches on the stall door, focusing on them to keep from crying. But the truth crashed over me anyway. This wasn't the first time. It was just the worst time. The loudest, the cruelest. When I finally looked at my reflection in the mirror, I didn't see failure staring back at me. I saw the woman my father had been carving into shape for years, small, afraid, dependent. A project he controlled, not a daughter he loved. That realization didn't make me feel strong. It made me feel trapped. As I walked back to my desk, forcing my expression into something neutral, the words I'd been too afraid to say aloud finally formed clearly in my mind. My father said I'd never succeed without him, until he needed a loan from me. That moment hadn't happened yet, but somehow I could feel it coming. Like the ending of a story I was only beginning to understand I was living. My name is Aubrey Keller, and until that moment, I never realized how much of my life had been shaped by a man who needed me small so he could feel big. I spent 28 years believing his version of me, the one where I was too emotional, too soft, too dependent to survive without his guidance. He made me think my ideas weren't good enough, my instincts weren't sharp enough, my existence wasn't valuable enough unless he approved it first. I never wanted his money. I never wanted his company. I never even wanted his approval, not really. I just wanted something simpler, something every child deserves. I wanted him to respect me, to see me, to believe in me without conditions. But Victor Keller didn't give love freely. He traded it for compliance, and I'd been paying that price my entire life. Growing up with Victor wasn't like having a father. It was like living under a CEO who evaluated your worth quarterly and found you lacking every single time. When I was 10, I brought home a painting from art class. I'd worked on it for weeks, mixing colors carefully, trying to capture the way sunlight looked through trees. I was so proud. But when I showed it to him, he glanced at it for 3 seconds and said, "Your proportions are off. Trees don't look like that." He wasn't teaching me. He was correcting me. There's a difference. When I got an A on a math test, he asked why it wasn't a perfect score. When I made the honor roll, he said the standards must have dropped. When I cried after a bad day at school, he told me tears were for people who gave up too easily. Every moment with him was a test I didn't know I was taking, and I never passed. When I graduated college with a degree in business strategy, Victor offered me a position at Keller Dynamics without asking if I even wanted it. He just assumed. And I, desperate for his approval, said yes immediately. I thought working together would finally make us close, that he'd see my potential, that we'd become a team. Instead, on my first day, he introduced me to the staff with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is my daughter, Aubrey. She'll need a lot of hand-holding, so be patient with her." The room laughed politely. I forced a smile, but something inside me wilted. That introduction wasn't a joke. It was a warning, to them and to me. He was telling everyone exactly how much I was worth, not much. From that day forward, every person in that office treated me like decoration, like the boss's kid who didn't earn her spot. And maybe they were right, because Victor made sure I never got the chance to prove otherwise. I spent 3 months developing a client retention strategy that could have saved the company thousands. I researched competitors, analyzed trends, built models, and presented everything in a detailed report. The VP of Operations, Marcus Grenley, asked to review it before the board meeting. I thought he wanted to help refine it. Instead, he presented it as his own idea 2 days later. Victor praised him in front of everyone. "This is the kind of strategic thinking we need more of, Marcus. Well done." I sat there, frozen, watching Marcus avoid my eyes while accepting credit for my work. When I tried to speak up, Victor cut me off. "Aubrey, let the adults handle this. You're still learning." I didn't argue, I just smiled. But that smile felt like swallowing glass, and something inside me cracked a little wider. After that, I stopped waiting for Victor to notice my work. I started building my skills in secret. I enrolled in night courses on data analysis and strategic forecasting. I studied case studies until 2 in the morning, my eyes burning from screen light, but my mind finally feeling sharp. I watched webinars, read industry journals, and taught myself everything Victor refused to teach me. No one at Keller Dynamics knew, especially not him. For the first time in my life, I was learning without his shadow looming over me. Without his corrections, his dismissals, his constant reminders that I wasn't enough. And slowly, quietly, I started to believe I might actually be capable of something he couldn't control. 6 months later, a departmental lead position opened up. I'd been doing the work of that role unofficially for over a year. My manager told me privately that I was next in line. But when the announcement came, the position went to someone else. Someone with less experience, less output, less everything. I found out why when I overheard Victor talking to HR outside his office. "Aubrey's too unstable under pressure," he said casually, like he was discussing the weather. "She's not ready for leadership. Maybe in a few years." I stood there in the hallway, paralyzed. He wasn't protecting me. He was sabotaging me, deliberately, personally, and he didn't even sound conflicted about it. That was the moment I realized he would never let me rise, because if I succeeded, I wouldn't need him anymore, and that terrified him more than my failure ever could. 2 weeks later, I attended an industry panel on digital transformation. I wasn't supposed to speak, but during Q&A, I asked a question that caught the moderator's attention. Afterward, a man approached me with a warm smile and a business card. "Jordan Ellis," he said, "Director of Strategy at Creston Analytics. That was a sharp observation you made. Have you thought about consulting work?" I blinked, caught off guard. "I work for my father's company, Keller Dynamics." Jordan's expression shifted slightly, like he understood something I hadn't said. "Well, if you ever want to explore other opportunities, reach out. You clearly know what you're talking about." It was the first time in years someone had treated me like I was competent, like my thoughts mattered, like I wasn't just Victor Keller's disappointing daughter. I kept that business card, and for the first time, I let myself imagine a life outside my father's control. A month later, a coworker I barely knew pulled me aside during lunch. Her name was Simone, and she worked in communications. She looked nervous. "I need to show you something," she said quietly, glancing around. "I wasn't supposed to see this, but I think you deserve to know." She handed me her phone. On the screen was an internal email chain between Victor and several senior staff members. The subject line read, "Ray, Aubrey's role moving forward." I scrolled through the messages, my stomach sinking with every line. "She lacks the basic intelligence to handle strategy. Keep her on simple tasks, nothing client-facing. I'm handling it, she won't be a problem." My hands started shaking. This wasn't tough love, this wasn't preparation. This was sabotage, calculated, deliberate, cruel. Simone touched my arm gently. "I'm sorry, Aubrey, but you needed to know." I nodded, unable to speak, because now I did know, and I couldn't unknow it. That night, I got home, dropped my bag by the door, and slid down the kitchen cabinets until I was sitting on the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest and cried silently, the kind of crying that comes from deep exhaustion rather than sadness. I wasn't sad, I was broken. For years, I'd blamed myself for not being good enough, for not earning his respect, for failing to meet his impossible standards. But the truth was so much worse. He never intended for me to succeed. He built the cage. He locked the door. He threw away the key. And I'd spent my entire life thanking him for it. I whispered into the empty kitchen, my voice hoarse and small. I can't survive here. For the first time, I meant it. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. Not angry, not sad, just awake. I opened my laptop and pulled up my resume for the first time in years. I updated my certifications, added my real accomplishments, the ones Victor had stolen credit for or dismissed entirely. I wrote a summary that reflected who I actually was, not who he told me I should be. Then I pulled out Jordan Ellis's business card and sent him an email. Hi, Jordan. We met at the Digital Transformation panel last month. I'm exploring new opportunities and would love to connect if you're still open to it. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Within an hour, he replied, Absolutely, let's set up a call. And just like that, the door I didn't know existed started to open. Over the next 2 months, I built my escape plan in secret. I finished certifications in advanced analytics and strategic forecasting. I gathered work samples, carefully documenting everything I'd created that Victor or others had taken credit for. I reached out to former professors, industry contacts, anyone who might vouch for my actual abilities. I was meticulous, quiet, strategic. Victor didn't notice a thing. He was too busy running his company into the ground with outdated strategies and ego-driven decisions. He thought I was still the obedient daughter who would never leave. He was wrong. Jordan's firm, Creston Analytics, offered me a position as a senior strategy analyst. The salary was 30% higher than what I made at Keller Dynamics. But more than the money, they offered something I'd never had: respect. When Jordan called to make the offer official, I felt tears sting my eyes. Not from sadness, from disbelief. We see real potential in you, Aubrey, he said. You're going to do great work here. I thanked him, my voice shaking slightly. After I hung up, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. Someone believed in me. Someone saw what I was capable of. And for the first time in my life, I saw it too. The final humiliation came during a budget planning meeting 2 weeks before I was set to leave. I suggested reallocating resources toward digital client engagement, citing data from 3 credible industry reports. It was sound. It was smart. It could have helped. Victor didn't even let me finish. He laughed, loud and dismissive, cutting me off mid-sentence. Aubrey still thinks like a student, not a strategist. Maybe one day she'll understand how real business works. The room laughed, not because it was funny, because he expected them to. I didn't laugh. I didn't defend myself. I just looked at him calmly, and in that moment I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, just clarity. I was done, and he had no idea. 2 days later, I walked into Victor's office and placed my resignation letter on his desk. He glanced at it, then at me, barely interested. What's this? I'm leaving, I said simply. I've accepted another position. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking. Let me guess. Some startup that'll fold in 6 months? Aubrey, you're not ready for the real world. You'll come crawling back in a month. I smiled gently, not out of spite, out of peace. I won't, I said. And I walked out of his office, out of Keller Dynamics, and into a life I'd built entirely on my own. I didn't look back, not even once. At Creston Analytics, everything changed. My ideas were implemented. My insights were valued. My contributions were credited to me, not stolen by someone higher up the ladder. Within 3 months, I was leading client strategy meetings. Within 6 months, I was promoted to lead analyst. Jordan pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "You're exactly what we needed. I'm glad you took the chance." I realized something profound in that moment. I wasn't incompetent. I was never incompetent. I was suppressed. And now, finally, I was free. A year later, Creston launched a specialized analytics division focused on predictive market modeling. Jordan asked me to lead it. I built the team from the ground up. We developed tools that clients loved. Our division became one of the firm's most profitable branches. We started pulling major clients, some of whom had previously worked with Keller Dynamics. I never targeted Victor's company. I didn't need to. His outdated methods and ego-driven leadership did the work for me. Clients left him because they found better options, and one of those options just happened to be mine. Meanwhile, Keller Dynamics was falling apart. Victor's refusal to modernize, his inability to retain talent, and his reputation for being difficult to work with finally caught up with him. Contracts were lost. Key employees quit. Investors started pulling out. I heard about it through industry gossip. People would mention it carefully around me, unsure if I cared. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just listened quietly and moved on with my day. Victor had built his empire on control and fear. And now, it was crumbling because he never learned that respect can't be demanded. It has to be earned. 6 months later, Victor called me. I stared at his name on my phone screen, my heart pounding. I hadn't spoken to him since I left. I hesitated, then answered. "Aubrey," he said, his voice strained. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I said carefully. "What do you need?" "I just wanted to check in," he said. "See how you're doing, catch up." But I could hear the tension underneath, the crack in his voice, the hesitation. He wasn't calling to check in. He was calling because he needed something. I answered his questions politely but kept my distance. When the call ended, I sat there, staring at my phone, knowing this wasn't over. 3 months later, the news broke. Keller Dynamics was in serious financial trouble. A major contract had fallen through. Investors were threatening to pull out completely. The company was hemorrhaging money. And the contract they lost. It went to my division at Creston Analytics. Victor called again. This time, he didn't pretend it was casual. "Aubrey, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice tight. "In person, please." I agreed to meet him, not because I wanted to help, but because I needed to see this through. I needed to face him one last time, not as his daughter, but as the woman he tried to destroy. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. Victor looked older, thinner, like stress had carved years into his face. His hands shook slightly as he picked up his water glass. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. I nodded, saying nothing. He took a breath. "The company is in trouble, Aubrey, real trouble. I've tried everything, but nothing's working. Investors are walking away. Clients are leaving. I don't know what to do." He paused, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "I need capital," he said. "I need help, and I know you're doing well. I thought maybe you could invest, or loan me enough to stabilize things, just until I get back on my feet." I sat there, calm, listening to the man who spent my entire life telling me I'd never succeed, now asking me to save him from his own failures. When he finished, I leaned forward slightly and said softly, "I can't fix what you broke, Dad." His face fell, not with anger, with devastation. I continued, my voice steady. "You spent years making sure I believed I was worthless. You sabotaged my career, dismissed my ideas, and humiliated me in front of people I had to work with every day. You did everything you could to keep me dependent on you. And now that I've built something without you, you want me to save you." Victor opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said. "But I'm not doing this to save you either. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." I stood up, placed money on the table for my drink, and walked out. He didn't follow. 2 months later, Keller Dynamics filed for bankruptcy. The news spread quickly through industry circles. Victor was removed from the board. His reputation, built over decades, collapsed almost overnight. Clients who'd stayed loyal out of habit finally moved on. Employees found jobs elsewhere. Victor tried to reach out again. Texts, calls, emails, all of them with the same desperate tone. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. I'd spent my entire life letting him control me, and if I let him back in now, even just to talk, I knew he'd find a way to make me feel guilty, to make me doubt myself, to pull me back into the version of myself he wanted me to be. So I blocked his number. I deleted his emails. I moved forward. 3 years later, I was promoted to Vice President of Strategic Development at Creston Analytics. I bought my own home, a small place with big windows and a garden I tended myself. I celebrated my promotion with people who truly valued me. Jordan, my team, friends I'd made who saw me for who I actually was. That night, standing on my porch, looking out at the life I'd built entirely on my own, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because Victor failed, but because I finally succeeded. Without him, despite him, in spite of everything he did to convince me I couldn't. He wanted me small so he could stay big, but I learned to grow anyway, and I finally became someone he can't control, diminish, or define. I don't hate him. I don't think about him much at all anymore, because the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's realizing they no longer have power over you. And I'm free. What would you do in this situation? Have you ever had to walk away from someone who made you feel small just so they could feel powerful? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing. There are more stories like this worth hearing.